in to a Cycling UK Women's Festival of Cycling session about inclusive cycling and non-standard cycles. Really the session's about showcasing some of the cycles that are available, where you can get hold of them, how you can try them out and where you can buy them. But we're also going to be talking more widely about access issues and how we can make cycling more inclusive and how we can make our cities, streets and communities more inclusive for everybody. We've got a great panel of speakers, my friends and colleagues from London and around Scotland today. So I would like to welcome them in. We have Isabel, who's from Wheels for Wellbeing. Brendan, my colleague at Cycling UK, who's based in the north of Scotland. We have Audrey, who's a participant of one of our programmes at Cycling UK. And we have Shona, who is part of the VBello tandem cycling group, and my colleague Ken Talbot, who is the world's fastest hand cyclist. And I really just say that because I like to show off that I know someone who's in rather famous, actually. So it's great to see you all. Thanks very much for joining us. Some of you at the last minute. It's great to have this opportunity really to talk about something I know we're all incredibly passionate about. Would you just like to give everyone perhaps a 1 minute rundown of who you are and why you're here and why you're involved in this work? Isabel, perhaps you can kick us off.
Yes, hi. I hope you can hear me. My name is Isabel Clement. I'm the director of a small charity based in London called Wheels for Wellbeing. And I'm a disabled person and a cyclist, a hand cyclist. Not the fastest hand cyclist, probably the slowest hand cyclist in London and in the world. I cycle for, the reason I cycle is for fitness, to keep my heart pumping and for the fun of it, but I cycle through the streets of London mostly. And I run an organisation which is the voice, tries to be the voice of disabled people who cycle in the UK. And we also run some inclusive cycling opportunities down in South London. So that's me.
Fantastic, thank you, Isabel. Brendan, you're next on my screen. Can you tell us a bit about what you do?
Yeah, my name is Brendan Dugan. I'm a development officer for Cycling UK up here in Inverness. Over the first couple of years of my work with Cycling UK, I helped coordinate a project called Wheelness with my colleague Fiona, where we supported over 200 people to cycle in a free, supported and augmented fashion. So basically, we were giving people access to bikes who might have traditionally struggled to access them to benefit their health, wealth and well-being. More recently, during the COVID-19 outbreak, we loaned our adaptive cycling fleet to people in the local area, families, people living with disabilities, etc., and impairment, in order to benefit them at a time where it's hard to stay active. In terms of my personal cycling habits, I am a daily cyclist. I prefer it as a commuting option, but my passion lies in mountain biking, though my injured body maybe disagrees with that a little bit.
Thanks, Brendan. Ken.
My name is Ken Talbot, and as Suzanne did mention, I am the world's fastest hand cyclist, but I've not always been that way. I started hand cycling here in Scotland probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and my very first ride, I couldn't do 3 miles. A friend of mine that volunteers with Cycling UK had to help push me back, and from there I just progressed onward. And I do it because I absolutely love cycling, and when I'm not on furlough, I do work with Cycling UK. Working with the All Ability Cycling Centre, ABC, and the Edinburgh Hand Cycling Experience, where we give people a chance to try out hand cycling. And the reason I do that is, to be honest with you, it's because of the smiles I get from people when they try the bikes and they realize how easy it is and how much freedom it can give them.
Wonderful, that's great. Shona, how about you?
I'm Shona. I visually impaired and I'm a tandem cyclist. So I sit on the back of the tandem and I do pedal. All this nonsense about people not pedaling on the back. We work just as hard as the front riders. I love cycling, and when I'm not on furlough, like Ken, I work for the ABC. So getting people on bikes, it's great. People who have never ridden a tandem before and they really get into it, enjoy it. The club side, the pilot, the person up front they don't see themselves as, you know, helping us out or anything. We're all club members and we all go out on rides and have great fun. For Cycling UK, I was trying to develop a walking programme, which was going to help people to get their fitness up before they go on bikes and things. But due to furlough, that hasn't been able to happen, but it will in the future.
Thanks, Shona. It's been a really difficult
And I hope people got that because my connection.
Yes, the connection from Edinburgh today is not that good, unfortunately. I have been out with the V-Bella group that Shona is part of, and the speed the tandems riders go at is really, really quite incredible. They outpace me pretty much the entire ride. And then there's quite a competition to eat cakes at the end, which I was pretty good with. Audrey, could you tell us a bit about why you're here today?
My name's Audrey, and I'm a disabled person who rides an e-trike. I've always loved to get out into the countryside, but due to my MS and health conditions, this had become less and less. And I really needed to find a way back out into the countryside. It had become almost non-existent. I felt my choices were an e-trike or a mobility scooter. I couldn't get my head around a mobility scooter, so an e-trike it had to be. The stars were aligned, as they say. I started looking into it. I got the opportunity to try one. Thought, I'm not sure about this, but yeah, I can do it. And decided I wanted to get one and was trying to work out how to finance it when I got told about the Wheelness project. I applied thinking, gosh, I'm really cheeky applying. These are really expensive. They're never going to give me one. And within about a month, I had one. And with the help from Brendan and Fiona at Wheelness, who have been so supportive, and my husband, I've now 2 years and I'm back out in the countryside doing what I love.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Audrey. It's really good to hear about the difference that the right cycle and the right support can give people. But for those people who don't really know what we're talking about, what is a non-standard cycle, what's a tricycle, what's an adaptive cycle, I think we've got a fantastic little film from Isabel's organisation to play so that you can see exactly what it is that we mean.
Bicycle, tricycle, hand cycle. I want to ride my bicycle, tricycle, hand cycle. I want to ride my recumbent. I want to ride my trike. I want to ride my side by side. I want to ride it where I like. You say steps, I say run. I say go. You say this man, hey man, racing's just not my scene, and cycling's easier than walking. You say walk, I say ride. Rumble strips, no thanks. Eyes bright above the bars, my bike wants to reach the stars. All I wanna do is bicycle, tricycle, and cycle. I want to ride my bicycle, tricycle, and cycle. I want to ride my recumbent. I want to ride my trike. I want to ride my car. I want to ride my bicycles are not the only cycle, so rethink who can cycle. Oh yeah. Mum, dads and tots, they'll be riding today. Wheelchair users, everyone. Oh yeah. On your marks, get set, go! Bicycle, tricycle, hand cycle. Bicycle, tricycle, hand cycle. Bicycle, tricycle, hand cycle. I want to claim my cycling rights.
That's fantastic, isn't it? It really gives the flavour of the joy and the freedom that a cycle can bring to so many people. And Isabel, I think you sang the song and organised all of that as well as the cycling.
Oh yeah,
it's very, very
the
impressive.
combined joy of singing and cycling. What could be better?
Absolutely superb. So we can just talk perhaps a couple of minutes about the cycles that you use, or the cycles that you support other people to use, just so we get an idea of a bit more detail, just a tiny bit about the different things that are available. So perhaps Isabel, if we start with you again, and then we'll talk through some of the questions that are popping into the screen.
Sure. So as you saw just now during the video, basically there is very little that cycling can't do. Really, you get some wheels and you get some kind of chain and pedals, and really it's just down to engineers to put their skills to the issue of getting different bodies to cycle in any way that it might be possible, and impossibility is just not a word in cycling. So yeah, hand cycles, you cycle with your hands, you cycle from a seated, not a saddled position, much more comfortable. It's a really good aerobic exercise. I've never heard of hand cyclists talking about saddle sores, but maybe somebody else will tell me otherwise. And so yeah, hand cycles, you use your arms. You can be assisted by batteries, whether you're on 2 wheels, 3 wheels, 4 wheels. So really effort and the amount of energy you have, or the terrain on which you cycle, really doesn't have to be at all a barrier. If balance an issue, 3 wheels, 4 wheels again. So I think, yeah, we shouldn't. We tend to, in the English language, to equate cycling with bicycling and talking about being on 2 wheels when we talk about cycling. And that, to me, is one of the first barriers we need to remove. We need to stop people equating cycling with being on 2 wheels. We just, at Wheels for Wellbeing, we talk about cycles, not bicycles. Sometimes bikes, because that's a nice shorthand, but language is really powerful and really important. So I think once we stop using the word bicycle for meaning cycling or cycle, we'll have won most of the battle about why a lot of people think they can't cycle.
Absolutely, language is a really important thing to make sure that everyone is included in the conversation. Audrey, would you tell us a little bit more about your cycle and your experience of using it?
Mine's an electric assisted trike. There's not an awful lot I can say. I'm not really an expert on them. It's taken a bit of getting used to. You have to balance quite differently. You have to watch out for camber. I learned that the hard way. There's different levels of electric assist. I always have to use some sort of level, but it's good to have the option there to put the power up for hills. My legs can do the movement, but they don't have the power. Not an awful lot more I can say, really.
No, that's absolutely fine. Brendan, I know you support, you've supported a lot of people to use different sorts of cycles. Could you perhaps tell us something about an adaptive cycle? I know the side-by-side bikes are incredibly popular with lots of different people. Could you just give us a bit of chat about how that works?
The side-by-side in particular, or just several ones? Yeah, the side-by-side cycles, they're really fantastic for people, particularly with learning disabilities, because like one side, the steering coupling is uncoupled, and there's various modes that you can set it in so that the participant controls some of the pedal action or all of the pedal action, or shares it with you. It also has a significant cargo capacity, so like hand in hand with someone who maybe has a more profound disability, you may need to take more kit with you in order to support them on the ride. So they're really handy for that. They're just incredible machines. They're so well engineered. The ones in particular by Drayson and Van Ram. You know, trikes traditionally, they have quite a high center of gravity. They can be quite easy to tip, whereas these ones, they take some flinging about, and there's absolutely no way that you're going to tip one. Between the weight and the engineering of them, they're really fantastic, very well engineered products, developed with an awful lot of thought for the riders and the people that support them.
That's good. So can we talk briefly perhaps about where you can try these things out? Because certainly I've got a great local bike shop where I live in East Lothian, but most bike shops simply don't stock these cycles, do they? So it's actually very difficult to get hold of one. Shona, I'm wondering, perhaps you could tell us a bit about the Edinburgh ABC and the sorts of cycles that we have in stock and the things that you can try out in Edinburgh and the Lothians.
Yes, we have all sorts of bikes. Obviously, then I'll talk about hand cycles, but we also have the side-by-side tandems we're talking about. We have normal tandems, which is kind of normal. The tandems that as visually impaired people use, some doing the back. We also have trikes. We have electric ones. We have all sorts. Just there's something there for everybody. And different people can come along to the sessions and try them all out and see how they get on. Don't know if anybody's getting any of this. Sorry.
You're breaking up a bit, I'm afraid, Shona, for me. There's a number of inclusive cycling organisations around the UK. Brendan, I think you know a little bit about certainly the network in Scotland. Could you just tell us a little bit about the cycling organisations that you know in Scotland? You need to unmute yourself, unfortunately. It's an inevitability of these things.
My apologies. So yeah, the main one is our partners FAB. They basically led the way with adaptive cycling in Scotland. You know, their arm of adaptive cycling is known as Blazing Saddles, and basically they've supported disabled children and young people in addition to their families, and offer various support in various forms. Fab Bikes and Blazing Saddles have introduced thousands of disabled young people to cycling since 2015. Their primary base is in Callander, alongside Wheels Cycling Centre there. However, they have outreach operations all across the country. And even in fact, since the lockdown happened, in the process of easing out of the lockdown, there have been 4 pilot projects using hubs in Angus, Fife, Stirling and West Lothian to train young people and deliver family bike bubble sessions to families with diverse needs. This is a brilliant example of collaboration. It happened with partners turning this from a concept into action in a 4 to 8 week period. And there's definitely evidence the need for further developing inclusive cycling services throughout Scotland. Blazing Saddles also continue to deliver 8 weekly community engagement packages to meet the aim of developing independent and sustainable partnership hubs in every local authority area across Scotland. And also, with this age that we're living in, I sometimes receive sort of nebulous and random inquiries about all ability cycling. And remarkably, Google searches bring up partnerships all across the country, ones that I wasn't aware of, that the technology that we have make us privy to. They're actually everywhere across the country, ranging from Highland, Murray and Aberdeenshire up here, right down through central Scotland, Lothian and the borders. So it's actually quite extensive. But again, if you don't know what you're looking for, it can maybe be quite hard to access. So that's where the roles of people like us are really important to mediate that information out of us.
Thank you, Brendan. We're putting together a briefing sheet, aren't we? So we'll be able to let everyone know these things. Isabel, you've got some good knowledge about what's happening in England, certainly. Could you give us some details about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I can only concur that the importance of being able to try before you bike, basically, and that's even more important for people who are not just going to use a bicycle. So there's a huge network across the UK in general, but in England and Wales, basically there's an organisation called Cycling Projects who have been really instrumental in supporting the development of inclusive cycling hubs, or what they call Wheels for All centres. And again, places where people can turn up and at particular times where they can borrow a cycle and go for a ride, supported by volunteers and staff who have the knowledge of all the different types of cycles and all the different types of adaptations that can be made to them, and people come with the expert knowledge of their bodies and how they function, and then together it's about basically problem solving, finding the right cycle for the right person. In London, there's a whole network again, which we've worked very hard over the last few years at sort of coordinating a bit of a partnership. So we've put together a website called cyclingforall.org, which tries to keep up with all the places in London which are working to, again, provide cycles to people, for people to try. And then all of us individually, we're all different organizations, whether or not we're connected into a bigger network. And we've all come from different traditions, if you want, or points of view. Some people some organizations have grown out of the efforts of carers of people with learning disabilities. So they're particularly focused on people with learning disabilities getting cycling. Others have come from the visually impaired perspective, and others, like Wheels for Wellbeing, are absolutely pan impairment. So we're not specialists in anything, we're just specialists in all the cycles we have, and then we ask people to bring their own expertise of who they are and how their bodies work, and then together we work to get people cycling. So again, it's all about passionate people, experts in their own experience, getting together and getting people cycling. There are then plenty of conversations that can get going about what, whether people want to continue cycling at centres away from streets or just in parks, on greenways, or whether they want to start getting cycling out there on the roads, on the streets, and purchasing their own or hiring, etc. So yeah, but I would say the key, or the other element of coming to an inclusive cycling hub or all ability centre, whatever you want to call them, is also about meeting other disabled people who cycle and sharing experience, because as a disabled person myself, I know that's one of the absolute keys to moving forward on the journey to anything really, but in this case to cycling, is sharing the experience of other disabled people and learning from them.
Thank you, Isabel. Certainly our evaluations of our projects, for Cycling UK projects in Scotland, show exactly those things, the importance of sharing experience and coming together, feeling as though you're not alone. And really, I suppose, being part of the cycling family. I noticed a comment coming up in the chat about the word cyclist, and some people do find that difficult, or find that challenging. It's quite interesting. I'm someone who calls myself a cyclist, not because I go to the shops on my bike, which I don't really consider being cycling as such, but when I'm out on my bike in the countryside, or a long ride or bike packing, I do feel like I am a cyclist. Does anyone else have any thoughts on language and what the word cyclist means to them? Yes, Isabel.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation about, there are negative connotations to the word cyclist particularly from the non-cycling community, but actually, as a disabled person, originally when I first got the clip-on part of my hand cycle to transform my wheelchair into a hand cycle, I didn't think of myself as a cyclist at all. It was just a piece of disability equipment, and just to help me keep up with my kid in the park. And I really only thought about it in that frame of mind. It was an addition to my wheelchair. And it's only in getting involved with Wheels for Wellbeing and meeting other disabled people who cycle that I went on a journey in my own head and thought consciously, then, why aren't I thinking of myself as a cyclist? I'm a driver, I'm a wheelchair user, but I don't think I'm a cyclist. I don't think I'm cycling. I'm just wheeling, my wheelchair on slightly rougher terrain thanks to my clip-on hand cycle. And it's only once I really had that conversation with myself and thought about the word cyclist and why didn't I feel that it was a justifiable thing for me to become a cyclist on the road to take my space, to claim a bit of the space for myself as a disabled person, to be a justified user of the road rather than stick to parks and pavements. Then it became a disability equality and assertiveness issue rather than a cycling issue. But becoming aware of coming into the cycling realm as opposed to just the disability sort of equipment kind of realm was really empowering for me. And I've found the cycling community incredibly welcoming and incredibly understanding of what I've been saying about disability and cycling. So it provides power as well as it has some negative, it's only once you really get into the cycling conversations on social media, etc., that you realize there's a whole realm of negativity around cycling from a lot of people. But for me as a disabled person, realizing I was a cyclist was a really enabling and sort of empowering moment.
Lovely. I think there's many views are available on this topic, so I think we'll probably just talk about the bikes just briefly before starting to address some of the other comments. Most of the comments coming into the chat are really about the wider issues about our paths and our streetscapes and being able to get out of the bike. So just let's talk about money. It's probably a difficult topic at any time, but I think people need to really know what we're dealing with here. Perhaps Ken I know has been involved in buying hand cycles, because I asked him to go and do a whole load of research and spend some money that I obtained, say, for the setting up of our hand cycling project. So Ken, you know a bit about the cash. How much is ballpark? What sorts of figures are we talking about here? If you want to buy a hand cycle or another adaptive cycle, how big has your budget got to be?
Well, unfortunately, that's the cost of the bikes is one of the biggest barriers that disabled people face getting into the activity. You can actually get hand cycles for as low as maybe £1,000 to £1,500. But the problem is, if you go with a bike that's too entry level, it's not going to be of a weight and a quality that is going to encourage you to ride. Because particularly as, for people involved in hand cycling, we produce very little power. So any added weight that we carry just slows us down. And if you get on a bike and you struggle with it, typically you're going to be fairly demoralized with it and not think that you can continue with it. So what we end up generally looking at are slightly mid-level bikes as a starting point. And they can start at anywhere from about £2,500 on up. A good quality standard bike, one of the most common bikes sold here in the UK, runs about £5,000 to £6,000. So they are quite expensive, and that's for a recumbent style hand cycle. If you're looking at some of the wheelchair clip-ons, like the type that Isabel has been talking about, those typically run about £4,500, and you can get those fully manual or electric assist. There's actually a wide range. So you can spend ultimately as little as about £1,500 on a bike, all the way up to probably about £15,000. So they are very expensive to get into. But the nice thing is that if you get the right one, it will last you for years, and it will be dead easy to pedal, and it will really encourage you to keep going, and it will really showcase what your physical abilities really are.
A substantial but perhaps worthwhile investment. I think I probably said something to my husband like that last time I purchased a bicycle. It was really a great investment in my future happiness, and that was very important. Brendan, can I just ask you perhaps a bit about how you buy these things? Are there any help to buy type schemes, loans available? Perhaps Brendan, if you talk about Scotland, and then Isabel can perhaps brief us a little on what's available in England.
Yeah, that would be great. There's numerous options available in Scotland at the moment. The main one that I would recommend for adaptive bikes in particular would be the Energy Saving Trust stroke Home Energy Scotland loan that you get. They're 0% over 4 years, and they're generally up to £6,000. However, on the website, it doesn't actually mention a limit for adaptive bikes. So I'm not sure about the details of that. It may allow you to go further north of this sum. Like I say, it's over 4 years, so a representative example of £2,400 for an adapted bike on the more basic end of the spectrum, that's the equivalent of £20 a month over the lifetime of, over the lifetime of the bike. It's £40 a month. My arithmetic's terrible, but that's a really, really fantastic and affordable way of people to be able to access these machines. I think that there's a certain level of prejudice that comes with bikes, for example, because people think, oh, £40 a month, that's a lot. To give an example, I barely use my car and it costs me a lot more than that just to own it. So like if people try to equivalize in the same sort of sense, they would find that they get incredible value, particularly if, as Ken's pointed out, they purchase the right machine that will last them for years. Another couple of options that are available for people, it was previously only the Green Commute Initiative that had a £3,000 limit for a cycle to work scheme. However, I've recently been informed that Cycle Scheme has opened up with no limit as well. So this would be another way of purchasing, and it would give the benefit of reducing the cost to the individual via salary sacrifice. So there's pros and cons to both of these things, because in the latter case, it's technically a loan during the lifetime of the payments and for 4 years afterwards, simply to prevent profiteering. So you're not technically the owner, but you do make significant savings. And with the EST loans, it makes it very affordable. It's 0%. And there's an important note I wish to add with these, because a lot of the time when I engage with people, people can express concerns that they're not creditworthy. This is actually designed to be accessible to all people. They either have it assessed as a credit facility, or they put people on what they call affordability criteria. And the design of it is that basically that anyone should be able to afford them. So this is to remove barriers to it, and also to stop people from thinking about it as a traditional credit facility that's laden with interest, further expenses, potential damage to the credit record, etc. It's designed to be accessible for people. And yeah, I'd happily discuss it further with anyone at a later date if anyone wanted to.
Thank you, Brendan. Isabel, what about options in England?
So there's, I mean, to be honest, the cost issue is one of the top 3 barriers consistently mentioned by disabled people who cycle when we do our annual survey. The survey reports are on our website. We survey about 200 people every year over the last 3-4 years, and cost is one of the top major barriers. So really important that we crack that really difficult nut. And we've worked hard at Wheels for Wellbeing for getting government to change, and it turns out it wasn't a change, it was a clarification about the fact that there used to be at least a perceived £1,000 top limit to the Cycle to Work scheme. So yes, the £1,000 limit is removed. It never was there apparently, but anyway, it was very well established knowledge in theory that it was a maximum of £1,000, and it's no longer a maximum of £1,000. So if you're lucky to be a disabled person in work, which a much lower proportion of disabled people are in work than non-disabled people, but if you are in work, the Cycle to Work scheme should be a possibility. The Access to Work scheme is also a possibility for subsidising the cost of getting to work, commuting to work. So that, if you are in work, those 2 are options. And we have known of people purchasing clip-on hand cycles and all sorts of other things on the Access to Work scheme, which is a DWP scheme. There's not a lot of other stuff in England, but we are working very hard, particularly in London, at pushing the fact that a lot of boroughs in London, and I don't know what it's like in other cities, let alone in Scotland, a lot of cities, a lot of towns have a cycle a sort of cycle loan scheme run by the local authority, which in Lambeth, for example, where we're based, is called Try Before You Bike. And we've worked with them and the provider organisation to ensure that it is possible not just to get a standard bicycle on the scheme, but also non-standard cycles. and we've already known of people getting tandems and also a trike, and it's starting to grow, the number of people who are getting those. And those are where you pay a monthly fee towards basically renting that cycle, and if it doesn't work out for you, just give it back, or if your needs change, you give it back. It is more expensive for a non-standard cycle than a bicycle, but it's still a lot cheaper than buying it, and then eventually you can buy it over time if you want to keep it. So Pedal My Wheels, thank you very much. That's exactly who they are. That's in London, but there's no reason why that cannot spread. If your town, your city has a cycle loan scheme, please lobby them to make it accessible. We've done it in partnership with ourselves, and it'll grow around London in partnership with other inclusive cycling schemes. So if people do give their cycle back, it wouldn't be a wasted investment. It would go to the local inclusive cycling organisations, or at least to hold on to until the next person wants it. And that makes it a lot more cost effective. A lot of people end up going to charities or crowdfunding, which is really not what should, we really wish there were a lot more public schemes. There's going to be an extension of, we hear from government, of a subsidy scheme for e-cycles, and we very much will be lobbying to ensure that it is not just for standard e-cycles, but the wider cycle profile. We are very strongly lobbying to extend other schemes such as Motability. Motability currently, disabled people who gets the high rate of personal independent payment can give that away to Motability in exchange for either a car or a mobility scooter or a powered wheelchair. And basically all of those are non-active modes of transport. And we are making the case that very strongly that cycles should be added to. We haven't won that battle yet. So the more people want to lobby with us, the better. But that's one way where you could actually just give away, which is a big thing, but give away your mobility benefit in exchange for those really expensive cycles. Pushing very much for cycle hire in general to become accessible. So the Santander scheme in London, and I'm sure there are others around the country, only provide standard bicycles, and for the moment not even e-bicycles, and we want to push them very strongly to include adaptive cycles, or whatever we want to call non-standard cycles, to be, they're publicly funded and supported schemes. They should be inclusive of everyone. And then also the finance sector should be coming into this market and provide financing schemes. I know there are issues about whether people are creditworthy or not, etc. But again, that's something that we at Wheels for Wellbeing want to be working with potential partners to try and resolve and develop. Financing a 5K, 6K, 10K cycle is no mean feat, but it is absolutely a worthwhile investment, not only for the individual, but for society at large, because what we put into our cycling, it means we also save the NHS. Our mental well-being, our physical well-being is increased vastly, and also provides us with transport, etc. So absolutely a worthwhile investment. And as far as I'm concerned, it's about cycling equality, and we must all fight for that.
Absolutely, thanks, Isabel. There's comments here. There's something from Alex Richards, who's also suggesting the Motability scheme needs extending to include cycles. I know there was a review in Scotland as well that suggested similar. I think there's a lot of support for that, and as cycling organisations, there's a lot we can do to lobby to make sure that cycling is inclusive of all cycles and all people, so at least that particular barrier is sorted out. Yes, the non-standard cycles in bike share schemes is something certainly Scotland's been talking about. The only scheme I know of in Europe is in Nantes, because I saw it when I was in France last year. I met Isabel for lunch just before we left, so it was just after we saw you that we discovered that. But I think there's one in Portland, in Oregon. But it's clearly something that's absolutely necessary, and the logistics need to be sorted out. Just on one other sort of topic, this is the Women's Festival of Cycling, so it'd be wrong really not to just address that. So perhaps a question or Shona is, do you think there's additional barriers for women in accessing inclusive cycling opportunities? Do you think the barriers are just higher for women, or do you think it's really the same for everybody trying to access an adaptive cycle?
I haven't found it to be an issue myself as a woman. I don't know, I mean, I can only really talk from the tandem cycling side of it. I think we just face the same issues as everybody else, you know, the cost of the cycle, storage of the cycles, and the other physical barriers and things. But I don't feel being a woman makes it any more difficult, to be honest. People might disagree with me on that one, but I haven't found it an issue.
Audrey, Isabel, do you have any comments on that before we move on to the wider accessibility issues? Audrey?
The problem I have, I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or because of my disability, but the weight of the trike, it is so incredibly heavy, and to transport it anywhere, obviously I have to get it into my car. I had to change my car because it wouldn't fit. I now have a good car to get it in, but I can't push it up the ramps. My husband has to be with me and put it up and down the ramps. But say, whether that's because I'm a woman or because I'm disabled, it's hard to say.
Something there to address. Isabel, are you waving at me? No? Yes?
Just briefly, yes, just briefly. I think actually this area of cycling is probably an area of equality in cycling. I'm not sure there's particularly differences in disabled women and disabled men getting into cycling, just as easily tricky or welcoming. The weight, etc., the weight issues of cycles, particularly with the assist, is a real issue. I don't think it's a female issue particularly. It's generally over the disability sector. Having to change your car because you've got a bike is also, it's a disability issue. I mean, the cost of disability is huge, and it doesn't stop at the cost of a cycle. You have to be able to get your equipment around each other. And storage, I mean, mine is stored in my car. I haven't got the space to store it in at the house. So, you know, it's a bike shed as well as a car. I think we've got equality of inaccessibility across genders. I think the only thing I would say about cycles and gender, it does get very geeky, and there are probably geeky women out there, but I think it's a bit of that bit of the cycling culture is probably better suited to men. It doesn't stop me, I have to say. I just go, so what? I don't know, and carry on. But people still love my bike. It's still love to talk about it. And I've put flowers that a flower garland at the front of the on the battery, and that gets people talking and diverts them away from talking to me about gears and stuff. So it's fine. It's fine. Just accessorize, ladies.
Thank you. So I think I'd like us to really talk the rest of the session really about the wider issues, because I'm well aware from the work I've done with friends at RNIB Scotland and Spinal Injury Scotland that it's really not just about cycles and accessing cycles. It's really the way we put together our streets, cities and towns to exclude people. So I was wondering if we could really talk about how can we make our towns, cities, communities accessible for everyone, for cyclists, so if you want to call yourself that, but for walking and wheeling too, so everyone can get around whatever piece of transport they're using. Audrey, you, I understand, are out in the countryside. How do you find, are you on road or off road paths, or are you using country lanes? What's it like getting around for you in a rural area?
Well, at home I'm in a village on the outskirts of Inverness, so yeah, it's fairly built up right at home. I'm very hilly. I'm not keen on cycling here, and there's a lot of camber on roads, and drivers don't seem to understand if you're riding a trike, you cannot ride at the side of the road where the camber will pull you over or the drains will. They don't seem to understand. You need to be more in the middle of your road. So I do find that a bit of an issue, and perhaps some sort of advertising campaign could point that out if we're going to be seeing more adapted bikes on the road. I prefer just to load up and we go out into the countryside nearby. Issues I find there are sometimes the paths aren't level enough, but the biggest issue, a lot of paths have massive boulders at the entrances. I think it's to stop quad bikes going in, but that also prevents getting in on the trike. It prevents wheelchairs, mobility scooters, anything getting in, and I find that's a big issue.
Yes, I can see that's been raised as well in the comments. Tony Canning here earlier in the session was talking about the frustration because of the barriers. So I think that's a serious issue. Isabel, do you want to talk a bit about the barriers? Anything out?
Yes, I mean, infrastructure, I'll quote our survey again. Infrastructure is number 2, well, is vies for number 1 or 2 of the barriers for disabled people and cycling. And that's a huge area that Wheels for Wellbeing has been campaigning on, is making all cycling infrastructure accessible fully to non-standard cycles and to disabled cyclists who may be on a 2-wheeled cycle but may not be able to put it on their shoulders and go up some steps with it. So barriers and camber. Thank you, Audrey. We had a quick chat last night on doing a tech check, Audrey and I, and we were conferring about the issue of camber, which seems to be the one issue that most people who cycle have never actually thought about, because when you're on 2 wheels, you just adjust your body to the camber, and it's very rare that you even realize you're doing that. As Audrey said, if you're on 3 wheels, you have to be on the flat, and you may be able to cycle along a cambered road, but it means that you are using so much more energy, physical and mental energy, to stay upright and not tip out of your trike or hand cycle into the gutter or into the traffic. We had a little joke about, and I put that on a tweet last night, but one of the ways, I mean, Audrey says we should have a public education campaign for drivers, absolutely, and I thought maybe one of the ways is that those of us who feel bolshy enough about it could be wearing a tabard or something that has at the back, trike riders do it in the middle of the road, and basically we are often found in the middle of the road because that's the only safe place to be. And if you're in traffic, that does tend to take people surprise drivers. I have to say, I don't get a lot of road rage, very happily, because I'm a strange person on wheels and people tend to give me a whole load of space and not too much lip. I'm lucky in that way. I don't think everybody is. Yeah, it's a real issue. So we've put a lot of effort into influencing what has finally been released this week, LTN 0120, talking about geekiness. I've now become a cycle infrastructure geek, which is very sad, but it's really important that government guidance provides well, they're not standards, but at least guidance about how to build infrastructure that is accessible to all. Barriers, also an aberration, and far too frequently used and requested, often by the police. And we are again trying to battle those misconceptions that banging a barrier up or a boulder is going to solve any problems to do with legitimate users. What it does is it bars legitimate users, those who are going to benefit the most from cycling on safe infrastructure. Those who want to misuse cycling infrastructure will find a way. Those like ourselves who cannot just dismount, pick up our cycle and get over the boulder, the barrier, the whatever, are completely stymied by barriers or boulders or whatever, any other obstructions. So we came up with the Guide to Inclusive Cycling and published that and keep that updated. It's on our website, and you can please use it, download it, give it to your local authority officers, etc. But also, hopefully now you can just point to the LTN 0120 from government. Maybe that applies to England mostly, but I know that they've been working with Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales as well.
Yes, Ken's been our leading light in terms of engagement with Transport Scotland. We've been to some design workshops together and a number of campaigning activities. Ken, do you want to tell us a bit about barriers, but also what you've been doing? And then perhaps I'll bring in Shona so we can talk about tandems and the great fun you can have in getting lots of people trying to move a tandem over a fence when the barriers are too difficult to get through. Ken.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough that I've had a chance to work with Transport Scotland, as well as Jacobs, on the Cycle by Design cycling infrastructure guidelines, and I think that's been immensely helpful for all parties, because the guidelines, to my understanding, haven't been updated in the last 10 years. There's been a massive increase in disability cycling happening during that time, but our roads, our roads and our pathways, our cycle paths, they're often not suited towards disability cycling. And what we're working on doing is making changes to those guidelines so the newly placed infrastructure is more suited towards our type of cycling. And it's really handy having somebody with a disability and with experience in disability cycling on these boards, because they bring the awareness of the equipment and the experiences to the game. And we're able to let the designers and the city planners know what some of our restrictions are. And a lot of them are things that they've not even thought about. They never would have considered a bike would have a problem with. You know, some of the others, Audrey and Isabel, have mentioned some of the barrier issues. Excuse me. But one of the biggest ones that, or actually two of the biggest ones that get overlooked that I have to keep reminding people of, are the turning circles for the disability bikes, because they are rather big and unwieldy, and some of them can have 20-foot turning circles. So if you want to have tight switchbacks to get people up a hill or through an intersection, sometimes it's just not possible for us to get around them. And as Isabel had mentioned, sometimes we can't just get off our bikes and reposition them. The other issue, in particular with some of the hand cycles, is we only have about 5 centimeters of ground clearance. So even getting up and down dropped curbs or up and down drives, it's just not possible. And even with some of the clip-ons that I've used, I've had some ramps that I can get up in my hand cycle that I can't get up on the clip-on. So luckily we do have the opportunity right now to give input on what basically what the disabled and paracycling community's needs are in terms of access, so that the infrastructure that's being built from today onward can be built with us in mind, so that we can travel just as easily as anyone else.
Yes, I know that that's been incredibly valued by our colleagues at Transport Scotland. Shona, just wanted to bring you in about the needs of blind and visually impaired people and the work. I mean, we've done some work together through Walk, Cycle, Vote around trying to help cyclists understand the needs of blind and visually impaired people. Just want to perhaps give a flavour of some of the issues, perhaps as a pedestrian as well as a cyclist or a tandem cyclist.
Yeah, for the cyclist side of things, it's pretty much a similar situation to everybody else. You know, that if there's barriers and things, well, I suppose we have the luxury that we can get off and pick the bags up and move them around, but they aren't easy to manoeuvre and they are heavy. There's also, if we want to go and access other areas as well, transporting tandems is really difficult. You can't just put them on the train as you can other bikes. Walking around, the last little while has got really quite scary. I mean, the speed that cars are going at the moment has been it has just in the last little while has got crazy. The problems we have that other people will encounter as well is cars parked on pavement. That's one of the things we've been campaigning about with guide dogs and RNIB. That's and when you're cycling, you've got cars parked in the cycle lanes as well, which is also a problem. Yeah, we've had all the different discussions about drop curbs and things as well, because for people with hand cycles or wheelchairs trying to use the drop, they need drop curbs, but then we need some sort of indication when we're out with a guide dog or a cane as to where the road actually starts and bridges and things. So there's all sorts of different things we're trying to work out and try and a compromise that fits everybody. Well, not compromise, the solution that fits everybody. I'm not sure if people are hearing me.
We're hearing some of it, certainly. Thank you. We've just got a few minutes left, so perhaps I'm going to invite one last comment from everyone. Perhaps just a short sentence about what you would like to see happen. One thing that would really make the biggest difference, do you think, to make our societies more inclusive for everyone to be able to get around from A to B on a bike, walking, or wheelchair? Brendan, you had your hand up. Did you have another comment, and then perhaps your 1 minute vision for what it could be or how we could make that happen?
Yeah, basically, I was wanting to bring attention to, there's a really cool tool that's come to light recently called Widen My Path, which is like an online link that you can make quick suggestions as to how infrastructure can be improved in all areas across the UK. It's really handy and user-friendly. I found myself using my phone in odd moments while I've been waiting for appointments and adding it like literally in 20 seconds while I've been waiting. It would struggle to be more accessible. You can see other people's comments, and it's being fed back to local authorities about how infrastructure can be improved. I really feel it's only this type of mass movement and that'll help authorities understand the needs of active travellers, whether they be non-disabled, disabled, ride standard bikes or adaptive bikes. I think this is really incredibly important. And tools like this one that are accessible and aren't laden with jargon and you don't need to sign in through a million portals in order to use them are a really good way, because that's just further barriers to contribution. And in terms of my vision, like to go back to the initial conversation about labels, cyclists, motorists, etc., we're all just people trying to get around. And I think that people, if they had some sort of experiential some sort of experiential angle on it, and were able to understand the needs of different people and different demographics, we would really begin to prevent things like pavement parking and improve infrastructure for people all across the UK and probably worldwide as well, depending on infrastructure needs. So yeah, I just think that a mass movement is the most important part, and raising the voices of people who need these adaptations made, in addition to the greater good of society. Chris Boardman's pointed out that for every person that strongly objects to the COVID-19 infrastructure changes, there's 6.5 people that actually approve them. And we really need to raise these voices to try and drown out the minority of naysayers.
Thank you. Audrey, your 1 minute. What do you think needs to happen, or something that will make a significant change for you?
I would like to see more all-ability cycling centres where people can go and see what's available and try it out, and for these places to really be promoted. I didn't know they existed until a couple of years ago, and I know I'm not the only one. Perhaps information could be passed on to charities that support people with disabilities, who in turn could pass it on to their members. Just much more awareness that these things exist. I think it would make a massive difference.
Fantastic. That's at least something I feel we can do something about fairly soon. I suppose we live in our own little bubbles and feel that we're telling everyone everything, but really that's not the case, is it? We need to make sure everyone knows, and to bring in the money. I mean, that's effectively my job, is to make sure that we in Cycling UK have the money in Scotland to do the things that are important to people that we work with. Fiona, turning to you now. Hopefully we can hear your last view about what changes we really need to see.
What changes we really need. just more awareness, I think, would make a big difference. If there's awareness across the board, then changes will happen. At the government level, especially, we need to, get in the planners before the things are actually put in place. Get in at the planning stage and make sure that planners are aware of the needs of cyclists and people using adaptive bikes, and people with disabilities, whether they're wheeling or walking or cycling or however they're getting around.
Super. I can see lots of people agreeing with comments as we're talking. There's a lot of chat here. Ken, can we move on to you?
Yep. So I think my final thought is there are a lot of people such as ourselves who are working in the background to work with governments and groups like Sustrans to remove barriers, make things accessible. There are people like Suzanne putting in loads of effort to get organizations involved and aware of the need to deal with finance. But I think the one biggest change that would help everyone is that those of you who do have the ability to go out riding and do have a bike, do it, go out and enjoy it and have fun, make yourself visible. And those of you who don't have the means to get out cycling, find one of these centers where you can try out a bike and go out and do it. The more of us that are out there and visible, the more power we have in terms of making change. If we all hide back, nobody in the government knows that we need things. But if we come forward, get out and ride, and speak up, and at the same time have a lot of fun doing that with the cycling, that's going to be, I think, the most powerful thing. And for anybody who's maybe concerned that they can't do it, or maybe afraid of how difficult it might be, to be honest with you, it's dead easy. The hardest part of hand cycling is getting in and out. And there are plenty of people, including myself, who have crashed getting in and out of a bike, literally, not even moving, made an absolute hash of it, and still come back to have a good time. And I've yet to have somebody get off a hand cycle who has not had a big grin on their face because they enjoyed it. And that's what it's all about, just getting out, being happy, and doing something fun with your life.
Thank you, Ken. I never feel anything other than less than joyful every time I hear from you. Isabel, the last comment is yours before I do the closing.
Well, that's very kind, thank you. I mean, I absolutely support everything that's been said so far. I think language and imagery around cycling need to become much more inclusive. Anybody who is promoting cycling, please promote cycling in all its guises, not just the bicycling. We're pushing for more legal recognition of disability, of the fact that disabled people use cycles as mobility aids, because there are still legal barriers in our way, particularly things like we don't have a blue badge scheme for disabled people who cycle, but we need one. Generally, more public awareness, more awareness from the health sector of the power of cycling for meeting the health outcomes of patients, human beings. It's much easier than cycling is easier than walking. It's also easier than swimming for a lot of people. It's a lot less faffy, and you don't get your hair wet. But it's not promoting in the health sector. Yeah, we absolutely need more funding for tryout centres, for rental of non-standard cycles, and for supporting the purchase of non-standard cycles. Ultimately, I think generally the sector and the transport sector, the cycling sector, the health sector need to listen to disabled people about what they say about their mobility. We can communicate the power of it, but we have to be in the right places at the right times, just like Ken and myself have been able to influence, for example, background documents, which are going to have impact on the way the transport network is constructed for the next probably another 10 years or so until it's changed again. So please listen to us, involve us and support us, because we need to change the narrative around the mobility of disabled people, make it a lot broader. It isn't just about cars, it is about cars as well. And it's our mobility is slightly more complex, takes more energy and time to organize. We have to find the best way for ourselves, but only if we hear of how others have done it, and we have the support to get to the information and to try out the kit. So I would say, yeah, we need more of us disabled cyclists out there, visible, as you say, Ken. And any organisations who support cycling and tries to grow cycling, please involve us, put us at the forefront, as you've just done today. Thank you very much indeed.
Absolutely, thank you everyone. I think representation is the most important thing. It really isn't making sure that people have the voice and experience and lived experience and are able to make the changes that are necessary. So we've gone horribly over time. We could probably talk all day, so it just leaves me to say thank you very much to all our panelists. That was brilliant. I'm sure we could have another session in due course and perhaps review what's going to be happening across our countries. The Women's Festival of Cycling is on until tomorrow night, I believe. If you check out the website there, it's just flashed up on the screen. Hopefully lots of this will be recorded. I think you'll be able to get it on a YouTube link, so if anyone's missed it, they can enjoy it, or you can enjoy it again. Thank you very much, everyone who's putting in comments. We've only picked up a few, I'm afraid, because there's so much to say, but hopefully we can do this again. So I think I just need to say goodbye and wish you all a good rest of the day. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.